Guys, it's another plastic model kit inbox review today from John. Today we're looking at an old favourite, although maybe not so much of an old favourite because of the complexity of the kit's build. This is Airfix's Series 1 Bristol Bulldog Mark IIa, the interwar biplane fighter that Airfix produced. We'll start off with the boxing history. The kit originated, I'll just take that off, sorry. The kit originated in 1969 in a red stripe bag kit, and that went through until the what I call the card kit, or a lot of people call the Blister Pack, which was released in 1973. An interesting feature of this photo is that it shows that the kit actually cost 25 pence in 1973. And that's about right. That's about how much they were. 1979 was the first boxing of the kit. This was probably the last boxing that Airfix did when they were still owned by Airfix at Hadfields. Interesting enough, it's marked new there, but the only thing that was new about it was the decals. It had new decals that ran down the side here. 1979 went through to the Panatoy rendition in 1987. When Panatoy owned Airfix, they released this kit in 1987 with the blueprint boxing. And then in 1990, the first Hella release was released in the box in 1990, and this was the same kit as was released in 1979 by Airfix. No change whatsoever except the box. The box itself had a white border around the original painted image on the front. 1993 went through to the next Hella release kit. This is the subject of the kit's boxing that I'll be doing the inbox review on. I think the only difference between my kit is it might have been a late year release because mine has Airfix flying hours on it, and I don't think they came in until around about late 1993, 1994 even maybe. But this boxing first appeared in 1993. Then in 1994 you had the new style boxing where the boxes went from Series 1 and Series 2 into the same size box. They were quite a much larger style of box, and also the image on the front of the box tended to be quite large as well, and that was 1994's release. 1996 saw a starter kit appear. This is with Humbrol acrylic paints and a tube of glue, and anyone who has this kit in their stash, this paintbrush, you should just set fire to it or throw it away because it's absolutely awful. But the kit itself is the same type of box as the 1994 rendition, exactly the same, but with the flying hours on the front there you can see. 1996 went through to 2002. And 2002 was the last time this model was released under the Airfix boxing, but this time it was done in the History of the Swedish Air Force present set, and the Bulldog appears there as the first aircraft featured from 1930, and the aircraft go through from 1930 there, as you can see, to 1993. I did show this boxing actually with the Gripen model release. I seem to remember I showed it with the Gripen model release at that time, which, yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? But there we go, the Bulldogs featured there on the Swedish Air Force history boxing. Now then, I want to leave you with a nice image there of a Bulldog Mark IIa in RAF service there being pushed out by some ground crew. And then what I'm going to quickly do now is what I usually quickly do. I'm going to just put this camera down and see if I can get some image there of the box that we're going to do a review on. And then when we do the review and we finish the review, I'll take you through the options and costings. It's still this this stand is not very good, is it? I'm having serious issues with this stand. I wish it was better, but it just is not. It's not a good stand at all. I'll have to try and invest in something else, I think. Right. These, oh God, it just isn't gonna. It's not gonna do it. Sorry about this, lads. I'll have to try and change the angle of the stand itself so I can get some leverage on it. There we go. It just doesn't seem to want to do it at all. Right. That should. There we go. That's better. Right. So there's the box in question. This is the 1993 rendition, I believe, which came out in a small box. You can see how small the box is. It's quite small. The Airfix Flying Owls on the front there. Series 1, 170 seconds. We'll open the box very quickly. It's quite a full box. Airfix kits in Series 1 tended to be reasonably full, especially when you're looking at kits in boxes this size. And I'll just take out everything as carefully as I can, because I don't want to wreck the sprues. I'm trying to get stuff out. There's always a couple of parts loose in the box, isn't there? There's always a couple of parts that aren't actually on the sprues when they should be. I think that's everything. Yep, that's everything. We'll put this box over here. And what I'll start with first, we'll start with the instruction leaflet, but before I do, I just need to fish something out of here, because there's a part in here which I tucked safely away so that I knew where it was. And there it is. There we go. Got it. Right, there's a couple of pamphlets inside the box, which is replacement parts service box pamphlets and stuff, and there's also a supermodels range leaflet there, which, yeah, usual garbage, isn't it? Decal sheet, which we'll look at in a minute. Now then, build instructions. Build instructions are quite simple. It's one sheet of paper, A4, and at the top you've got the aircraft's name, the Bristol Bulldog IIa and the Airfix logo. And then on the front of the pamphlet you've got lots of Gumph history, stats, general information on the aircraft, all in different languages there, and that's nice. I always think it's quite nice to have them in different languages, because these kits are sold all over the world. And you've got the model number there, 01083. Right at the bottom of the sheet you've got all the build icons for the instruction leaflets there, all the usual. There's nothing unusual there. And then you turn the pamphlet over, and there are a couple of things about this pamphlet and instructions really that are worthy of note, even for experienced modelers. And we'll explain why that is in a minute. As far as Airfix biplane kits go, this kit is actually quite complicated and reasonably detailed. A lot of Airfix Series 1 World War I biplanes certainly were very crude, not an awful lot of detail, and hardly anything in the interior at all except a pilot, maybe a pilot seat. But this kit actually has a floor pan, as you can see in section 1 there. The kit builds up in 8 sections, which is about average for an Airfix kit in series, even in Series 1 it's quite average. So section 1 there, you've got a pilot seat and a floor pan, and then the 2 fuselage halves. This kit is actually, the aircraft itself was built in tubular frame and fabric covering, and I think it had an A-clad aluminium, polished aluminium forward fuselage leading up to the radial engine on the front, which was a Bristol Jupiter. The pilot would be general period pilot colours, and the interior of the aircraft I would strongly recommend, although it does say here 105, I'm not sure what 105 number is, but I would strongly recommend you paint the interior of this plane maybe light grey or even silver. Or you could actually also paint it buff, which was the linen covered colouring prior to it being painted silver on the outside. Section 2 is the lower wing, tail empennage, and the windshield, and the pilot's gun sight there, which sits in front of the windshield. And you'll also see there's a couple of navigation lights there, parts 16 and 17, but also parts 11 to 14 are also wing supports, which are quite interesting, because this aircraft featured a lower wing which was actually supported below the fuselage, even though the spar itself sort of was bolted to the underside of the fuselage. It needed additional strengthening struts, which was a feature of the Bulldog II over and above the Bulldog I. Section 3 there is a handy little tip produced by Airfix there to introduce the decals to the lower wing before you commence any further from section 3. But what I would probably do is I would not put the parts that you put on the lower wing in section 4 and section 5 until you've painted the airframe. But they're basically telling you to apply the decals there before you commence. So they're probably advising you also to paint the airframe at this stage. Section 4, you've got the tail skid, the interplane struts between the fuselage and the upper plane, the lower radiator and a couple of bomb racks, and those actually fit, the 2 bomb racks actually fit over the top of one of the decals. So that's why they're asking you to put it in this place. In section 5, as you can see there, you've got the upper wing assembly. This kit, interestingly enough, has a 3-piece upper wing, the midsection structure there, and also the 2 outer wing with the interplane struts being fitted at that point. And then you've got 4 bombs. I'm not sure what parts 23 and 24 are there, I'm not quite sure, but they go on the upper surfaces of the upper wing. And then you've got a couple of additional support struts that come from the fuselage to the midsection in parts 27 and 28 there, and that's this section of this kit's manufacture is the complicated part of getting this kit correct, because all those struts need to be aligned absolutely correctly, otherwise you won't get part 21 and 22 into the interplane struts position. Then you've got 2 I think they're handling struts that come out the lower section of the wings there towards the tips, parts 36 and 37. And then you move on to section 6, and this is one of the sections of the kit that I think a lot of modelers would enjoy, because there's a lot of modelers, not just my subbers, but there's a lot of modelers out there that enjoy using metallic paint and oil washes to produce a metal finish on plastic engines. And this would probably be right up your street, because the Bristol Jupiter, as you'll see from the sprues in a minute, the engine is actually nicely detailed on this kit, and it's an externally mounted engine, which means there's no cowlings over the top of it. So these guys who like the oil washes on metallic paints, and I think they're going to have some fun with this. So nicely detailed engine, and section 6 is the engine sub-assembly, and then in section 7 you put the engine onto the front of the front of the fuselage with the 2 exhaust parts there, part 44 and 45, that go in place after you've put the engine in place. And then section 8 is the undercarriage assembly and the wheels, which is the final assembly section before finishing the kit off. So that's the instructions, quite easy. They're quite easy to follow. Complicated, tricky build, but they are quite easy to follow. Next I want to go into the decal sheet, because the decal sheet on this kit is actually really nice. Now then, the decal sheet on this kit is quite big. It's actually nearly the size of the box. And I think this is one of the early stages when Airfix started to utilise separate red sections to the British roundels as separate transfers, which made it so that you were responsible for the transfers register and the way in which all the transfers align on the roundels. It took away that issue sometimes that you had with kits where the roundels didn't quite meet up and they weren't registered properly. There are 2 versions available in this kit, as you can see. There's a Swedish Air Force version on the left upper side of the trans decal sheet there, and the RAF one, which is featured for the rest of it. And I think this particular aircraft is modelled under the Bulldog that's actually on display in the Hendon Museum in London, K2215. I'm pretty sure that's where it's sat at the moment. But the thing I can see about these transfers is there's not an awful lot of backing film, which is good, and the register on them is actually very, very good. Even the small badges there, yeah, you can read them, and you can see the actual image that's inside the badges really well. But both versions suffer from a problem which I often find with biplane fighters and biplane aircraft of this period. They have full rudder transfer flashes, and these transfers, they look pretty, but they produce a pretty god-awful finished result, because what happens is you apply the transfer onto the rudder, and then all the way around the back edge of the rudder the transfer never meets, and so you end up with this god-awful serrated edge of transfers with a gap in between the transfers and the actual plastic that's usually silver instead of the colour it's supposed to be, which is red, white and blue. And what I generally do with these is I cut them short, so they don't actually meet the back of the rudder, but you can still use the K2215 transfer image, which is part of the decal itself, and then I paint the red, white and blue exterior sections to the rudder so that it looks correct. The problem with this is that you can never totally 100% match the red, white and blue on the decal because they vary within kits quite a lot. But that decal sheet is actually quite nice, and as I said, the backing film is very, very, very thin. And the transfers, I'm putting my fingers over them, the transfers are quite apparent. They are quite thick, so they will, they'll probably need some decal set to get them to set properly on the model, but they will look nice, and they're nice and brightly coloured. And this aircraft would produce a brightly coloured finished product for your display lineup. The first part I want to show you is always the first part, is the transparency, and on this kit, yes, you've got a transparent windscreen, but what I'm not sure is whether it's going to come out on the picture. I think it will. You've got a little tab there to locate the windscreen in the correct place on the fuselage, and I'm hoping that's coming into view nicely. That's actually a nice little piece. It's quite crystal clear. You're not going to be able to see much through it because it's outside. You're not really going to have an issue. It's just really a windscreen to stop the airflow hitting the pilot all the time. And then we'll go through the parts very quickly. There are actually 5 sprues here. 1 or 2 of the parts have come off sprue, so we'll go through those very quickly first. There should be is there a tail plane missing here? I think there's a tail plane. It must be in the box still. Hang on. See if I can get the tail plane out, because I'll show you the tail plane. Yeah, there it is. It's in the box. The tail plane is better to show you loose than what it is. I can't get it out because it's stuck in a flap at the back here. I'll get it out for you, 2 seconds. There we go. There. Right. Now then, I'll show you these loose parts very quickly because it's easy to show you the loose parts rather than the ones that are on the sprue. The pilot himself is a very typical Airfix pilot. A lot of people in the modelling trade don't like these guys, but I actually quite like them. I think he's reasonably detailed. He's got a nice form. He's actually got a face and a tie, a Mae West, boots, and his flying costume is actually quite nicely rippled. The clothing there it's quite a nice. He's a nice pilot figure. I quite like the Airfix pilot figures. A lot of people don't, but I do. I think they're fine. The rudder and tail plane. The rudder, it's nicely moulded with a navigation light there. You can see that. The thing I liked about Airfix is that they produced a part which it looked like it was covered in fabric. The rudder contours there are quite nice, and they flow through to the tail fin itself, and it's a nice looking piece, so that's good too. And again, it's the same setup with the tail plane, as you can see. Again, you've got nicely fabric covered effect there on that part, which is quite nice to see. That's the tail plane. And the propeller, a little bit of flash on the propeller, which is a bit of a shame, but it will clean up nice. Yeah, it will clean up nice. A little bit of flash on that propeller there. Might be easier if I show you it like that. But that's basically flash on the propeller, which is a shame, but it's very apparent there. But the propeller's nicely moulded. That should clean up quite nice and give you a nice finish. Right, the sprues. We'll deal with this sprue first, the lower wing. The lower wing has a massive tab here, but looking at the instructions, that tab is actually part of the kit. And I'm guessing that it's probably part of the manufacture of the aircraft itself. Maybe there was a plug there or something, or a strengthening plug or whatever. But again, you've got the ribbed features there on that plastic part, which is quite nice. You can see them there. It's a nice moulded lower wing. I like that. Next sprue, is one of the upper wings. You can see nicely moulded upper wing. There's not a lot of flash on this kit, I'll be honest with you. It's quite clean. There are a few tabs that need removing. That's the intersection of the upper wing. Again, that's quite nicely moulded, as you can see. Nice features on that. These two tabs here will obviously have to be removed. And then you've got quite a few other detailed parts there. I'm guessing they're the bomb racks and the propeller retainer there, which is quite nice. They're nicely done. You've also got the interior of the fuselage. Oh, the seat's just come off there. I'll just show you the seat quickly. Nothing to write home about, but that's the seat. Pilot sits on that, nice and easy. Then you've got the interior of the fuselage, which on this kit has a floor pan. And the floor pan is here. Again, nothing to write home about. It's quite straightforward part. The interior is quite crude, quite basic, but again, you're not going to see an awful lot through that aperture when the pilot's in place. The exhaust system there, which is nicely moulded, there's no flash on it, there's no serious issues with this kit whatsoever. I've even noticed that on the fuselage there you've got some, it looks like stitching marks. Or are they, I'm not sure what they are, but they're nicely recessed mouldings there, and also the difference between the ribbed rear section and the A-clad metal section to the forward section of the fuselage, that should paint up nice as well, which is good. That's the other side of the fuselage half. You don't really need to see too much about that. I wonder if I can get that in close at the back there so you can see the stitching detail on the back of that, which is quite nice. I'm not sure if it's going to come into view, but there is some stitching detail in there. Interplane struts and a few support struts, and that's the second tailplane there. They're nicely moulded parts. I'm very impressed actually. I've never built this kit before. I've often seen it in the shops, but I've never built it myself. This is the part with the engine in place and the engine in the sprues and the wheels. There's a lower wing there. Sorry, the other side of the upper wing, which you can see is nicely moulded. And then you've got the wheels. The wheels are nicely moulded as well, which is nice. And then you've got this beautiful engine. Look at that. Now I can see a few modelers having a field day with that, getting right stuck into that. So my mate over in America, I think he'd enjoy some work building that. That's a beautifully moulded Jupiter engine. The other part as well is quite nicely moulded as well. I think that will paint up gorgeous for some washes, won't it? And then you've got the exhaust assembly there, which again is quite nicely moulded. Really nice. They're nice parts on this kit. I'm very impressed with the parts. Right. Now that that's all sorted, we've gone through the parts. We've got through all the gump that needs to be got through. I just want to put, well, this is a tip for small parts that are transparent. This is a big tip, and it's a very good advice tip. Put the windshield into something that's square and can be folded square so that you don't lose it, because if you lose that part, I'll guarantee you'll not get a replacement from Airfix, because Airfix haven't had this kit in production since 2001. So you'll have to buy another model second hand. You know, for something that you can easily safeguard, it's not worth losing the full cost of another kit. Right, I'll just put all these parts back in here because I don't want to lose them. How going in? The kit's packing is a bit tight because it's a small box and there's quite a lot of parts to this kit. Yeah, quite a lot of parts indeed. So I can get that into there, which it is, that's nice. Put all these parts in here. One of the problems with having a lot of parts to a kit inside a small box is simply this: that you can't get everything back in without a bit of a squash. But that's back in place, there we go. I'll leave you that image there, and then we'll pan back onto the computer, because what I want to do now is I want to go through the gump, and there we go. Is that going to sit on front of my computer so I can show you some images of some of the alternatives and because the alternatives are worthy of note on this particular model. Right, a little tiny bit more. I need it up a little tiny bit more. There we go. Right, options. There are a number of options for the Bristol Bulldog Mark II, and they're quite interesting, but they're not all for what I would call novice or new to the hobby modelers. The first I want to bring up to is, actually I need to bring this image a little bit further away. I need to bring this a little bit further away so you can see all the images. There we go. This company, Amiga Models, are specialists in producing resin kits, and they actually do 4 different versions of the Bulldog. They do the Bulldog TM, not sure what TM stands for, but I'm guessing it's trainer model, as the kit is a tandem 2-seater and it looks like a trainer, conversion trainer maybe. They also do the Mark IIa, standard fighter, but they also do the Mark IV and another kit as well of the Bulldog. I'm not sure which one it was, I think it might have been the Mark I. But the Mark IV had an enclosed radial engine on the front here, so it had a fully cowled radial, and it had a standard Bulldog tail fin like all the others. But it's a nice looking kit. But these kits are resin kits. They're not for the novice builder, and because they're resin kits, they're limited issue. So that's Amiga Models in 1/72, which is one option. Then we go to 1/50th. Apart from the Airfix kit, there's only a resin alternative in 72nd, but we go to 1/50th. 1/50th is an unusual scale, but Artiplast is a company that featured 1/50th scale models, and they did quite a few of them, and the Bulldog Mark IIa is not an exception. There's the Bulldog Mark IIa from Artiplast. I haven't seen any sprues of this kit, but I have seen sprues of other models that Artiplast build, and they're not too bad. They're usually about middle of the road price as well. They're never cheap, but they're not really expensive. I'll go into the cost of this kit later. 1/48 scale, we have what's called a Godfather kit here. This is the Impact Kit's Bristol Bulldog Mark IIa, and I call this a Godfather kit because it spawned lots of other models boxed by other manufacturers, but it's actually the same sprue that Impact Kit's built. Right. Impact kits, 1/48th. You also had lifelike hobby kits, 1/48th. Not sure on the accuracy of this kit. If it's anything by like looking at the image, I would say it's not too good. But I do think the lifelike hobby kits is actually the same sprue as the Impact kit. Yeah, so that's lifelike hobbies. Lindbergh, this is another Impact sprue reboxing from a different company. This is Lindbergh's 1/48th offering, different decals in this term. This is a nice looking kit actually. I have seen this kit built at a show once, quite a long time ago, and I remember it was really, really attractive. I like the look of this kit and its decals. So that's Lindbergh, 1/48th, and then Merit produced this very unusual boxing of 8 different aircraft, of which the Bristol Bulldog is one of the featured kits. Now, don't be misinterpreting this boxing, because in the box you only get one plane, and the plane was advertised on the side, I think, that you got with this offering, but it went from the Albatross D3 and the D5A, the D5A to the Newport, to the Avro 504, Sopwith Camel, the triplane from Fokker, and then you had the Bristol Bulldog, and then you had the 2 World War II aircraft, the Walrus and the Swordfish, but they were all biplanes except for the triplane, obviously, which was 3-winger. They were all biplanes, and they came under the historic aircraft collection from Merit Aeroplanes. And I don't know, I've never seen a sprue of this kit, so I have no idea what the quality of the kits were like, but they are quite cheap. I've seen offerings of this kit very cheap. Go into the costings later when I go through the information sheet. So that's Merit. Pyro also produced an Impact kit. Pyro, I think Pyro brought this kit out at around about the same time as Impact, But the Pyro kit, the decals are reasonable. I've seen Sprues, and I've seen this kit somewhere in a shop quite a long time ago, and it looks quite nice. It looks quite nice inside. That's the Pyro offering, and then you have the SMER offering, which of course is the impact kit. This is probably the latest rendition of the Bulldog in 48 scale of the original impact model Sprues. And this is probably the one that is the most easiest to get hold of and reasonably costed. Right, 1/48th leads to 1/32nd, and this is the King Baby. Oh my God, this is so gorgeous looking model of the Bulldog Mark IIa. You can't believe it. 1/32nd is a huge scale for this kit, and even the Bulldog IIa is quite an impressively looking large model. I have seen images of this kit built up, and the engine, when it's painted up correctly, it looks real. It really does look like it could start and run. But this is a resin kit, and it's not for the novice builder. It's actually quite a difficult kit to prepare and assemble, but it does look very, very impressive when it's finished. So that's all the options from 1/72nd through to 1/32nd. And I'll leave you with another image now of this aircraft, and I want to pan you back to this image down here so that I can show you I can read the information sheet. There we go. Is that going to sit there nicely? Yes, it's going to sit there nicely. Fantastic. Right, the information sheet. This is the information dump from the kit. The Airfix itself, the model itself is the Airfix Bristol Bulldog Mark IIa, featured in Series 1 with a serial model number 01083. It's produced in 1/72nd scale and has decals for two versions, one from number 56 Fighter Squadron Royal Air Force, and one is a Swedish Air Force example. There are 49 plastic parts on 5 grey silver sprues and 1 plastic part on a clear sprue, totalling 50 parts in total. The dimensions of the kit is 5.5 inches long by 5 3/4 inches span by 1 3/4 inches high on its undercarriage. The options and costs are interesting. The Airfix Bristol Bulldog Mark IIa usually retails for between 6 and 15 quid, depending on the boxing and the age and condition of the kit. The Omega resin kit, Bulldog TM, and most of the other kits that come from Omega resin, they usually retail for between 15 and 20 pound. The 1/50th scale Arty Plus Bulldog IIa features between 6 and 10 pound, and the 48 scale options, the Impact Bulldog IIa comes between 15 and 20 pound. The Lifelike Hobby Kits Bulldog IIa comes between 11 and 15 pound. The Lindbergh Bulldog IIa is about 10 to 20 pound. The Merit Bulldog IIa, I've seen it as cheap as 250, but it's usually about 5 to 10 pound. The Pyro Bulldog IIa, this is the Lindbergh and SMER kits, is 12 to 15 pound. The SMER Bulldog IIa is 4 to 12 pounds. Sorry, I did actually say that the other kits were Impact Bulldog kits, but they're not. They were actually Pyro Bulldog IIa kits. The Lindbergh and the SMER kits that I featured on the options, they're actually Pyro moulds. They're not Impact moulds. Sorry, I just wanted to correct that. In 1/32nd scale, the Silver Wings resin kit of the Bulldog IIa usually retails for about 100 quid. I have seen it for about 90, and I've seen it usually for $99.99 or $145, because it's quite easily accessible in America. But in England, it's usually about £100. Conclusions. Right. This kit is very much as most Airfix kits were released at this time, and the one thing in its favour is that it's the only injection moulded kit of a Bulldog IIa in 1/72nd scale. However, like a lot of biplanes made by Airfix, the Bulldog IIa is a tricky build with lots of struts between the wings that need to be aligned correctly, or it will not go together very well at all. The external engine does make for a treat for all you guys that like to oil wash metallic paint to bring parts to life, but the tail decals are a definite no-no for me. A pleasant enough looking model with a nice bright colour scheme and markings, it should stand out in your collection, and it's a cheap buy too, so it can't really be that bad. In my opinion, I would recommend this kit. It looks reasonably detailed. Yeah, it is a tricky build, but most modelers out there that have been building, say, 10 or 20 models in the past shouldn't really have an issue with this. And as long as you make sure that the parts, the struts, are cleaned up correctly, and that the wings are jigged when you are setting the wings with the struts into place. You shouldn't really have an issue. So I would highly recommend this kit. It's a cheap, very cheerful, tricky build, but you know, I think it would make a nice addition to your collection, especially if you like biplanes or interwar aircraft. So that's it for the Bristol Bulldog from Airfix. I hope this video has been of some use, and I hope that you guys out there are having happy modelling days just like me, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye bye for now.